everybody, welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today I am jumping right back into my series of reviews covering the Mummy universe, once again joined by my buddy Jacob Martin, who has discussed The Mummy and its sequel, The Mummy Returns, with me, and you can check out those reviews right now. But today we're actually going to be dipping our toes into the spin-off series, The Scorpion King, starring none other than The Rock himself, Dwayne Johnson. The Scorpion King tells the backstory of the man, the myth, the legend, the warrior that would soon be called the Scorpion King, as he goes on a path of revenge against those that killed his brother. On the journey with him is an exotic future-telling sorceress. So, first and foremost, gotta give my buddy Jacob a shout out for joining me in not only the Mummy films, but this as well, which he'll be giving his thoughts on in just a hot second! Now, I don't know if he'll be keen on checking out the rest of these Scorpion films or not, because there's quite a few of them. There's actually 5, I think, which is kind of crazy because that's so much more movies than the parent series of just The Mummy, which I think is just a basic trilogy. Automatically, that just makes me think it has to be good, right? It has 4 sequels. Well, only time can tell, but I guess let's ask the question on if it is any good. And I guess from a typical perspective, you can't really call it a phenomenal, memorable masterpiece like I feel like the first Mummy is, but it is fun. There's a lot of really well planned out action scenes with The Rock. His character's pretty different based off of what you saw in The Mummy Returns, but you know, that's not really a terrible thing either, because in general, he's viewed as a soldier, and a good one at that. Most importantly, he's a hero in his own right, and extremely humanized. You didn't get a lot of that charisma that The Rock is known for when you saw him in The Mummy Returns, but you do get that here. I also mentioned in our review of The Mummy Returns that I actually liked this character. It had promise. I wanted to see it more. I wanted to see him as the main villain of The Mummy Returns instead of what they essentially did, which was basically rehash the same stuff we saw in the first Mummy film. And seeing The Rock in his prime as the Scorpion King here, I think it works out pretty well, and overall I'm mostly impressed with how much of a good time that I actually had with the film. Again, I do not see it as a masterpiece, but I don't know, shut off your brain, drool a little bit, and just watch dumb, fun action. I'm game because that seems to be what the movie's kind of all about. But before I go on with more of my thoughts, here's Jacob's feelings on the Scorpion King.
What's going on, Dave and all his viewers? Thank you, Dave, for having me back on your channel once again, continuing our deep dive into the Mummy franchise. And today, we're taking a look at the spin-off prequel film in the Mummy franchise released in 2002, The Scorpion King, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as Matthias, or the Scorpion King, a character that we saw pretty briefly in The Mummy Returns, had a fascinating backstory in that movie, and then they badly wasted him and turned him into that awful CGI abomination at the very end of that movie. Ugh. In this movie, we see the backstory of his character and how he pretty much became the Scorpion King, even though we kind of got a backstory of that already in The Mummy Returns, but no, we got more stuff of this character. He's part of this dying race. He gets betrayed by a close friend. He teams up with this sorceress, and they band together to take on like this evil tyrannical ruler so that he can lead the people justly. Which to me makes no sense, because we see him in The Mummy Returns, and he's a character who's seeking power for himself. So I guess this is like set before The Mummy Returns and that origin story in that movie where he starts out kind-hearted and becomes corrupted over time. I am so confused over the lore established in this movie. I don't think this movie works as a Mummy prequel because it contradicts things that we knew about his character in The Mummy Returns. I had a lot of frustrations with that. I'm like, this movie does not work as a Mummy prequel. It just felt like, hey, let's get The Rock headlining an action movie because he wants to be an action star. Let's just call it The Scorpion King just to sell more tickets because The Mummy Returns did so well, and it feels like it's a completely different character. So this movie utterly fails as a Mummy prequel. There's aspects of this movie that really annoy me. We have our villain character, I think his name's like Memnon or something, and that character was an absolute cookie-cutter snore. I can't tell you jack squat about this character, like he's just there to take over the world and stuff, and he's not memorable in any way. The visual effects aren't really the best, but hey, they look better than the CGI monstrosity that we saw in the last movie, so at least we don't have any of that mess. And the movie just is pretty disposable at the end of the day. It tackles a lot of action movie tropes we've seen time and time again. There's a revenge story. We have a little bit of fantasy tropes with the Chosen One, and that trope's kind of been done to death over the years. Obviously, the Harry Potter movies, I feel like, did that trope the best. Doesn't really work as well in this movie, considering you're supposed to be doing a Mummy prequel, and we know the Scorpion King becomes a tragic figure by the end, as we've seen in The Mummy Returns. This movie kind of contradicts all that, and it doesn't fully work. However, if you take aside the fact that it's a Mummy prequel and you just watch it as its own movie, the movie's a heck of a lot more fun to watch. I've only seen this movie twice, actually. I saw it once several years ago as I was getting into this Mummy franchise, and I didn't think much of it then. I just didn't find the movie that interesting. The movie itself is pretty disposable, but it knows the type of movie that it is. It knows it's a silly B-grade popcorn action film. And I think on that front, it succeeds for what it set out to do. This was The Rock's first starring role. His first movie role was in The Mummy Returns, but this was his first leading man role. And I thought he filled in that role very well. Like, he's very charismatic playing this character. He definitely embraces being the action hero in this movie, and I enjoyed the one-liners and the quips that he makes throughout all the characters throughout the course of this movie. And you can see how he became a big action star because of the Scorpion King, and he's still going strong all these years later today. I'm looking forward to seeing the Black Adam movie coming out later this year in the DCEU. The movie just completely embraces its silliness. The movie doesn't overstay its welcome. It's only an hour and a half long. The movie completely embraces how ridiculous the story gets. Like, the movie has this guitar-fused score that shows, we're not taking this movie seriously. We're just having ridiculous loads of fun. I love the fact you got Michael Clarke Duncan in this movie, who absolutely chews the scenery, and seeing his rapport with The Rock as a Scorpion King was absolute awesome to see unfold. Kelly Hu, who was one of the most attractive women of that time in early 2000s movie. She was also the character Deathstrike with the long claws fighting Wolverine in X2. I liked her appearance in this movie as well, and she and The Rock have pretty solid chemistry. The movie's not anything special. The villain is a bore. The action can get pretty repetitive, especially near the end. But I like that the movie never overstayed its welcome. It's just a fun, silly little action film starring The Rock. And I got some solid entertainment out of this movie. It doesn't take itself seriously. It's pretty self-aware at times, and I enjoy the over-the-top goofiness of The Rock and all the other actors in this movie. So while the movie does fail as a Mummy prequel, when watching it as a standalone action film with a load of comedy sprinkled throughout it, The Scorpion King is mild fun. I can't say this is top-tier action cinema or anything, but it gets the job done for what it set out to do, and I can't hate this movie too much. So at the end of the day, I'll be giving The Scorpion King a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and on the 100-point scale, it's getting a 62 out of 100. That's right, I rated it a little higher than The Mummy Returns, which is pretty crazy. But I think The Scorpion King is more enjoyable for what it set out to do. The Mummy Returns had some story problems that I could not get on board with. This movie, while it fails as a Mummy prequel, it's loads more fun to watch, and I enjoy the over-the-top silliness of this movie. So, thank you, Dave, for having me on your channel once again, talking about The Scorpion King. I'm enjoying going through all these Mummy films and reviewing them on your channel. I know next we're doing the third Mummy film, The Tomb of the Dragon Emperor from 2008. I'm dreading that one because I've never been a big fan of that movie, but I'll give the movie another chance, and I can't wait to review it on your channel. I'm sure Dave will leave links in the description below where you can check out my YouTube channel and all the videos and content over on my end. Dave, I won't hog too much of your time. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this Scorpion King movie, so back to you.
Thank thank you to Jacob for your thoughts on this film. You can check out his movie and book review channels in the description box below. Send him some love and tell him who sent ya. Now, definitely some interesting thoughts you got there, man. Because our thoughts actually merge and they collide and disagree at the same time. So one of your biggest complaints about the film was that it contradicted what The Mummy Returns was kind of all about. I do see that. But I don't exactly think we know the full story yet. They essentially had to humanize this character, which means make him likable. So not a power-hungry maniac like how we saw in The Mummy Returns. To me, I guess it didn't really bother me that much because there's 5 movies. I mean, yeah, with different actors, but 5 movies nonetheless, 5 stories, which is enough time for them to flesh out a few things and explain how this character got to that point. I mean, if that's what they do. I don't know exactly what they do. I've never saw the movies, but maybe that's what they do. You know what I mean? For me, I actually like this movie for the references to Sodom and Gomorrah, the action scenes, the performance of Dwayne Johnson, and I don't think it necessarily contradicts anything yet. You know, it might, of course, but for me, it's simply too early to tell. My negatives just kind of come down to a slightly repetitive nature, kind of like what you said, Jacob, with some of the action scenes. Some of that really was repetitive, at least enough for me to feel like I could look away or I could do something else, and I wouldn't necessarily miss that much. Also, just like you had mentioned, other than The Rock, I didn't really care that much about any of the other characters. I mean, the idea of them was fine, what they could do was also fine, but every other character was forgettable. But again, it is a film that isn't trying that hard to be this masterclass of filmmaking with eye-opening, game-changing assortment of characters or whatever. It is what it is. Let's go ahead and break down my final score. From a technical, unbiased perspective, I find that this film works okay. You know, some of the visuals and the lines of dialogue seem to be more in tune with, you know, more of a modern, present tense sense of humor versus how people actually acted in that time period. Some of the people didn't look as dirty as they probably should for the time period either. So it feels like a production at the end of the day, but still, I feel like it's mostly dealt with in a way that people can still have fun with. My unbiased score is 70%. My biased score, or just how I felt about it in general, you know, I had a decent time with it. I'm not immediately going to say it changed my life or makes me want to go back and watch it again. I consider the film to mostly be kind of optional at the end of the day. So, you know, maybe tune in on TV, you see that it's playing, you think, oh yeah, I remember watching that movie, that was kind of fun, so you tune in. You're not against watching it, but you're also probably not going to be seeking it out in an effort to full-on buy it, unless it's a part of the Mummy collection, and they say, you know, buy the trilogy, get Scorpion King for free. And you're like, oh, okay, that seems fair. Again, it's fine. I had a good time with it, particularly with the action, The Rock's chemistry with everybody, that's always fun. But it's not a game changer. This bias score is 72%, meaning that, end of the day, when we combine those two scores together, 70 and 72, we wind up with a final rating of 71%. 71 out of 100 possible stars, or a letter grade of B- from my letter grading scale. And just like Jacob, I have it rated higher than The Mummy Returns. So at this point, he and I have all these movies ranked exactly the same, but you know, that's bound to change. Now guys, have you seen The Scorpion King? Have you seen the rest of the series of Scorpion King films? Is there a reason to continue watching them, in your opinion? Why or why not? And as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out.